Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries podcast. My name is Juras. As every week, I'm joined by Glenn Highcove, who's joining me all the way from California. And today we have a very interesting case. I would say a little bit of a different case than usual. It's more of a it's more of a horror story, to be honest. And I'm kind of excited to get into it with Glenn. So, dude, how are you feeling this week?
I'm doing okay. I think I don't know, there's a lot of stuff going around. Like everyone's paranoid about getting, sick. Just put it that way. And yeah, I don't know. The weather's been a little weird over here. And uh, despite all that, I've been really excited because this particular um, real life story I've had my eye on for some years now because it is so over the top that I think if you didn't know that it was a true story and you saw it in a movie and you didn't know the movie was like a nonfiction movie, you would just be like, wow, the producers and director are just going, the writer just went way overboard. Like this could never happen. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like this doesn't seem believable that someone could get away with this much in this day and age in America. Um, but yet it happened.
Exactly. We're gonna be talking about Ken McElroy, other known as the town bully of Skidmore, Missouri. Skidmore was a little town in Missouri. Now, I have this newspaper article, and I really want to read the introductory points. I mean, the first section of it, because when I read it, I just felt like I want to read this for our audience members immediately. And then let's just really jump into it because there's not going to be like a big timeline here of events because there isn't such information, at least online. We weren't able to get it. Maybe if we read a few books about this case, we would have like a more detailed timeline because I feel like there's a lot happening here. But I think we do have some very interesting points that we want to discuss today. And I think for people who already know about Ken McElroy's story, I think we will bring a new side to this story, a new way of thinking about it, and some really creepy stuff, I think, as well. So I'm just gonna read this news article. It happened a week after the death of Ken McElroy. I mean, the article was written a week afterwards, and it was written by Arnold Abrams, Newsday staff correspondent. Skidmore, Missouri. Like much of this story, the scene outside Skidmore's saloon shortly before high noon on a steamy summer day several weeks ago was reminiscent of an old fashioned Hollywood Western. Settled in the cab of a battered pickup, his wife and a six-pack of beer beside him was Kenneth Rex McElroy, a hulking 230-pound farmer with a lengthy arrest record, only one felony conviction, and a fearsome reputation as the town bully. Facing the 47-year-old McElroy on Skidmore's hot, dusty Main Street were several dozen stony-faced citizens who had surrounded him inside the dimly lit bar and followed him outside. Now they were staring him down in a wordless sidewalk confrontation. Suddenly the silence was broken by the stark pop, pop. Two high-powered rifle shots, powered by the sound of shattering glass, shrieks of terror, and more shots, about 5 of them, coming in quick succession from behind the pickup. Blood spattered and weeping hysterically, McElroy's wife clambered out of the bullet-ridden truck. Stunned and wide-eyed, the onlookers slowly rose from the ground where they had flung themselves and moved off to form a hushed circle. Only McElroy remained motionless. He was slumped over the steering wheel, and a hole the size of a $50 in the back of his head, blood oozing from a wound in his neck. Ken Rex, as he was known, was dead, a victim of the kind of sudden violence that had been his trademark. That killing, which took place July 10th, ended a several years nightmare for the 440 inhabitants of this tiny town in the rolling hills of northwest Missouri, a close knit, hard-working group of farmers who grew corn, etc., etc. Dude, um, is this like a good intro into what we're gonna be discussing this week?
Yeah, I think so because if you were to take this whole story and, distill it down to its elements, what you have is a quiet little town. It's a tiny little town. It only had something like at the time of the quote unquote murder, 437 people, I think, was the official population on the sign. And even now, when you look at it, it's just this really quiet little sleepy, barely occupied town. So you had this town that was trying to live, let's say by late 20th century, um, U.S. rules and culture and customs. And on the other hand, you have somebody who I will argue, or I will sort of try to make the point, the argument over the course of the show today. I would say this person was living by a whole other set of rules that probably had more in common with, like, let's call them pastoral or herding honor societies. So you're going to hear, like, this is just the fair warning ahead of time. I'm going to mention Afghanistan a lot, and before anybody touches that dial, it's not out of politics because we are not a political show. We don't talk about you know any politics here. I mention it because Afghanistan now is a great example of historical societies, over the past thousands of years, including societies that many of our ancestors came from, that listen to the show, whether it was like Scotland or the middle of Europe or various parts of Asia, societies where there wasn't a strong central government. People lived in, let's say, small tribes or towns or clans or things like that, families, groups of families, and where justice was meted out often almost immediately, and where these are called honor cultures, where your reputation was extremely important. In fact, I think this story will go to show that your reputation often had an outsized effect on the trajectory of your life and your success. So, this is a little bit of a preview of how to think about this case in terms of sort of, when when I guess when cultures and ideas clash, even though everybody in this case was coming from the same basic American culture, something clearly went off the rails here. So I think that's a good lead in for what we're gonna find out about
Yeah.
Mr. Ken McElroy, horrible bully. Which, by the way, this Ken guy, he's almost like like Biff from Back to the Future.
Yeah, of course.
He's like Biff on steroids. Like as awful as Biff is in those three movies, um, and Mad Dog Tanner and all that stuff. I mean, it's like that. I mean, it's almost like three Biffs in one.
I know what you mean here. So as I've said, just on my end, you know what I mean, how we should tackle this case. Yeah, I know we're gonna be talking a little bit of a different, let's say, structure this week. But it's, I think, a refreshing new structure for at least one episode. You know of like recent times, because we have been following like a certain structure, but yeah, we don't really have like an exact timeline for this week's case, but we do have like some points of interest. A few of the points of interest regarding this story of Ken McElroy. I think we could like start talking about those points, and then we could like sort of go into, you know your opinions that you have regarding this case, because I definitely think since you've been following this case, man, you have like more um interesting opinions. Like the first thing that I want to bring out regarding Ken McElroy, right, is that he was born in 1934. But that's not the interesting part to me. To me is that he was one of 16 children. So back in 1934, was being one of 16 children a normal thing? I think that's a pretty big family even for like 1934, right?
Yeah, I mean, so some things to point out is there wasn't really much birth control. That there was some forms of birth control, but not like the birth control pill and let's say abortion and things like that. And it was not uncommon for there to be families of like five, six, seven, eight, especially because you figure if you're agricultural or an agrarian economy, children are often expected to help with the farm work. So the more kids you have, it's like the more the more workers you have on your farm, who have a vested interest in it succeeding and and basically work for free. Um, but also you have to remember child mortality was a much infant and child mortality was much higher then, right?
Hmm.
So you had kids dying from things like polio and different fevers and measles and all these other things that even just accidents, right? I mean, it was a lot less safe back then. Infections, I mean, I think even antibiotics were not that common in that era. So yeah, that being said, Dr. Grande's take on this was like, gosh, it must have been really hard for him to get his parents' attention. Like he said, waving at them from across the room was probably like his equivalent of a close parental interaction.
Hmm.
And I think he was like one of the last kids born. Is that right?
He was the 15th of the 16 children, so you're right. He
Yeah.
was almost last one. But now, when you said that, kids are usually expected to help out on the farm, now, from what we can gather, Ken definitely didn't do that because at the age of 15, he dropped out in the 8th grade and actually slowly established himself as a small time thief, um, stealing stuff and also stealing cattle of all things, right?
Yeah. I mean, so that's, I think, case in point, that's some of the most valuable property a farmer can have, right? And, and like, it's property that can walk. So, if I go try to steal my neighbor's television, his television isn't going to walk off and follow me to a new location, right? I have to actually carry that thing and haul it away. But that's one of the insidious things about when all your assets, case in point, herding societies are in sheep or cows or pigs, which, I think he stole all of the above over the course of his lifetime. The cattle can actually follow you off to some other place.
Yeah, exactly. And the track record of his criminal activities, the thing that I see here is he actually avoided conviction every single time. Uh, Charges were brought against him in total 21 times, and usually the way that he would avoid conviction is by his witnesses refusing to testify in court because Ken McElroy would intimidate them. He would follow them around and sometimes park outside of their homes and just stare at the house of his witnesses of the crimes that he had committed for hours on end. And then the witnesses would not testify in court, right? Which is, I don't know, it's like it seems like Ken McElroy was a busy guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like I don't know whether he was born in the wrong place or the right place because these are tactics that are straight out of the, let's say, the organized crime playbook, right? In terms witness intimidation, um, intimidation of people in general. I mean, essentially, it's a form of like extortion, really. And it's fascinating because there are laws that are supposed to be enforced. This is going to be one of the many times that I hammer this point home. You keep on seeing it's almost like his victims were in a state of disbelief, and it was like a fox, or not even a fox, like a pit bull got into the hen house, and all the chickens didn't know what to do. You
Yeah.
know, and it was strange because then when the chickens would, using my metaphor, when the chickens would go to the farmer being the police, let's say, or the legal system. I'm not going to call it the justice system because there was very little justice going around with this case. It was they were strangely paralyzed. I think we'll investigate that a little later. But yeah, so and I think as Grande pointed out, and as I think it becomes very obvious, this became kind of this cycle of reinforcement where became a quote unquote winning strategy for him. It's interesting to think that if he had tried this in a place where there was more of him, he would have eventually run into another one of him, right? So if he tried it in, like, Al Capone era Chicago, or the outfit era Chicago, or New York, with the five families of, different crime families, he probably would have run into like another one of himself, and then he would have had to have it out. But it's almost like he had this criminal monopoly going on in this little like corner of Missouri.
Yeah. And, one interesting fact regarding his life is that he had more than 10 children, but like we don't have the exact number of children. And just in general, like the information is very scarce about his children and who he had children with. We only have one woman who's really out here on display. That would be his last wife, Trena McLeod. Now, um, I think he met Trina while Trina was 12 years old in 8th grade. Now, Trina is born in 1957. Ken is born in 1934. If I'm not mistaken, that's an age difference of 23 years. So, at the time when Trina was 12, it was already 1969. And by the time 1969 was, the year was, if I'm not mistaken, Ken would have been 35. So 35-year-old Ken McElroy met Trina when she was 12. So he's 35 and she's 12. And Trina becomes pregnant when she's 14. So your take, man.
Yeah, and this was actually, she was far from the only teenager, or underage person, and that he, let's say, um, started up a relationship with, if you can even consider it a relationship, because really, I have to wonder that there was a lot of coercing going on. So apparently, he was known to aggressively go after young girls in sort of the 12 to 14 age range, which, Trina was one of them. And as a result, he'd had, like I said, multiple children. He'd had multiple marriages. They think Trina was either his third or fourth wife. They're not completely sure. And these relationships were marked by him being very abusive. It's interesting as we'll find out about him, he almost never got in fights with people. I mean, other than, I think he attacked his principal, when he was in school, and he may have gotten in fistfights then. But as soon as he was old enough to own a gun, a firearm, against men, he was always using his firearms and using and threatening, and his firearm was his tool and his quote unquote strength. The only people he would use his fist on were apparently his domestic partners. So his wives, his children. There was one anecdote that I saw in some of the research, was that I guess at least one of his current or ex-wives had thought about killing him. with his own guns because he was just tired of getting beat up. I mean, he really, he was a cheater. He was always having, I think he even moved in Trina while he was married to someone else, um, into the house. His guy was just really
Yeah.
living, like somebody out of another century
I
in
have
some ways.
information.
Yeah.
I have information regarding the last thing that you've said. Um, so as Trina became pregnant while she was 14, she dropped out of school in the ninth grade and she went to live with Ken McElroy and his second wife, Alice. We only have the name Alice. We don't have like the last name or whatever. But then we know that McElroy later divorced Alice and married Trina in order to escape charges of statutory rape. What does this mean, dude? How are you escaping that? Because, like, we all know that Trina was 14, and you're like at that point 37. How are you like? Well, hey, was this like in the early 70s still acceptable, or like what?
You'd really be surprised, but the quote unquote age of consent, in some states, I think even now, can be as low as 14, depending on, I mean, it's, that's almost a bad joke about that. Um, like what states, because it's like the states that people tend to make fun of, I guess, depending on what part of the country you live. But yeah, I have to wonder if maybe this loophole that he was exploiting was because, especially back then, society wanted, if someone had already was in a situation where they were pregnant and they were underage, they're like, well, at least maybe we can kind of figuratively, you know, have the shotgun wedding with the guy where we're like, okay, look, now you're in it, now you're in trouble. Now you've gotten this girl pregnant, she's not even an adult yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to make you be responsible and try to do the quote unquote right thing by her, by at least marrying her so that, she knows she's going to be provided for. And like, that's it, buddy. Like you're stuck with there's your wife. You're not going to be doing this anymore. Unfortunately, it doesn't work when someone keeps breaking the rules. It's also worth mentioning, unless you were going to go there already, that um, like at one point, her parents, Trina's parents, actually, I think at one point she fled the marriage. I think this is after this, and then a whole other level of, let's say, threats and violence and even alleged arson um, comes into the picture, and I think this becomes sort of this a good look at what his playbook was in life for how he approached anybody that dared push back against his wishes.
I have some more information about the arson attempts. So it's
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's attempts because the sources that I've read said that it did happen. So at first, when I think they weren't married, Trina and Ken wasn't married yet, but I think Ken proposed to marry Trina. Trina's parents were heavily against it, so he actually went to Trina's parents' home, set it on fire, burned the house. I'm not sure if it burned down or anything like that, and also shot the family dog dead. Then, they get married and whatever. Ken avoids statutory rape charges. And then, eventually Trina gives birth to their kid. But then 16 days after that, Trina and the second wife, Alice, who was divorced already but still lived with Ken as well, both of them, Alice and Trina, like fled to Trina's parents' home. But then McElroy kinda tracked them down and brought them back. And then later on, when Trina's parents weren't home, he came back to their home and burned it down again for the second time and shot the family dog again. So I think he killed in like consecutively, like the family dogs were getting killed by him. So That's like the information right there, you know what I mean? But moving forward, um, in June of 1973, he was actually arrested for arson, assault, and statutory rape, but then he was released on a $2,500 bail. Now, in 73, I'm not sure if it's like regarding Trena these arrests were made, but yeah. What do you make of him getting released on bail for like 2005? I know like 73 money, this is a lot more money than now, but still, like the charges were arson, assault, and statutory rape, and you get a bail for like 2.5 thousand.
Yeah, and then often, I mean, on top of that, I mean, you're right. That's a lot of money in '70s dollars, but um, depending on kind of how your state justice system works, your county works, um, often you only have to put up like 10% of that money, and you can get like a bail bondsman to put up the rest of the money if you have collateral. So if you have like a house or a car or something else that they can seize, because the whole point of bail is to make sure you show up for court, right? So
Yeah.
you get out of jail, and then you put up that money. But then this is almost like the credit of how bail works is you have a bond put up, as I understand it. I haven't had to deal with this at all yet, knock on wood. Um, but yeah, it's fascinating because this is one of several notable events. I mean, it only gets worse from here.
Oh
So
yeah.
I mean, you know, what I mean, anybody that looks at that and says like, "Wow, that sounds like way worse than Biff in Back to the Future," because Biff didn't burn anybody's house down or kill anybody's dog. I mean, he did try some other things, but you know what I mean. Like this is already something out of like one of those like I said, a horror movie where you know this person is just determined and unstoppable, almost like I always think this case is interesting to anybody that likes movies like Dirty Harry or Death Wish, because those movies are sort of like justice, justice movies where something is going wrong and then the main character has to kind of become empowered and bring justice to a situation where there isn't justice. Well, this guy is worse in a lot of ways than any of the bad guys so far in a lot of those movies, or he's getting there. So yeah, I mean, this is what's crazy is out of everything, this is like a 5 out of 10 for what he's going to do um, later on, right?
Yeah, exactly. And moving later on, before he does the really unthinkable stuff, um, Trina and her baby were placed in a foster care at a home at Maryville, Missouri. Now, McElroy would sit outside of the foster home for hours at a time, staring at it, and then he told the foster family that he would trade, quote, girl for girl to get his child back, since he knew where the foster family's biological daughter went to school and what bus route she rode. Additional charges were filed against McElroy after that. Really no clue. Without stopping here for too long, dude, you have any more intel on the whole foster home situation while Trina was placed at a foster home? Because let's remember, she's like a very young girl at that point, already bringing up like a young child. So they are both at a foster home. But now McElroy was like, yo, I'll trade girl for girl because I know where your kid is. I have no idea about that. Do you have more intel?
No, I don't have additional info. I will say, and Trina's a kind of an interesting character in this whole narrative because on one hand, up to this point in the story, she's clearly a victim, right? And you got to figure her being put in a foster care. I mean, it must undermine her faith that that anybody has any power to keep her away from this guy,
Yeah,
right? I
exactly.
mean, her parents can't, and now the state can't, and this guy just keeps on coming like he's the Terminator or something.
Yeah. Okay, so on July 27, 19 1976, Skidmore farmer Romaine Henry said McElroy shot him twice with a shotgun after Henry challenged him for shooting weapons in Henry's property. So Henry was like a farmer, and allegedly Ken McElroy was like shooting guns on his property. And when, an incident, like the incident occurred between the two of them, Ken shot him twice. I think in the stomach, and I think at like very close range. Like, I think it was a situation where Ken, because he always carried like his shotgun around, I think he grabbed the shotgun and literally rammed it up against Henry's stomach and shot him. And like guts splattered all over the place. And I think that's exactly what Henry fed on one of the, I would assume, like news stations
Yeah.
when he was, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there was, and then there was, I heard even an additional part of the story with one of the other research videos was that, so the version I heard was, he heard somebody, Henry, right? He heard somebody firing on the property, and he goes and he's like, oh, who's doing that? So he goes and he drives around and he sees who it is. And then by this point, Ken, of course, has like quite the reputation, right? So everybody already knows you don't mess with this guy, because he's crazy and he will not leave you alone. So, uh, Romaine Henry, he sees him and he's like, well, I'm just I'm just gonna get out of here. So he tries to drive away, when he figures out who it is, and no, Ken jumps in the road in front of him with the gun, and then starts making these accusations that you've been stalking me and you were coming around my, and like, so this, I really want to, I'm going into this kind of explanation about this because I think this is really important to realize that even when people tried to avoid trouble with this guy, there was some percentage chance that he was going to maybe find a reason to mess with you anyway. And I think this is one of those things where somebody could have the wrong idea about this case and say, hey, this guy was just, a rebel and living his life. And yeah, maybe he bent some rules or did some stuff, but people kept messing with him. And it's like, oh no, this guy seemingly wants to make trouble for himself because he goes and, there's no sign, by the way, that he was like a paranoid schizophrenic or anything like that. Um, Dr. Grande mentioned he might have, most likely had antisocial personality disorder potentially, but not. There was never any. None of the research turned up anything like, oh, this guy had delusions or had hallucinations or was hearing voices or anything that would indicate some other kind of mental illness. Um, this guy really seemed like he was looking for people to bully, and here this poor farmer in his own land gets accosted and then gets his guts blown out. I'm trying to remember, didn't he also get shot in the face? I know the other guy did. This is coming later, but I thought that this guy had also gotten like shot twice. I could be wrong. I know in the interview that you mentioned, that the news report afterwards, he pointed out in the door where like his flesh had been blown into the door, because I think Ken came at him from the passenger side of the pickup truck.
I think so. Regarding the shot of the head, yeah, I think the next guy definitely. Well, the neck
Well,
pretty
yeah,
much,
yeah.
but Henry, I'm not really sure, but I did hear something about like him getting shot twice. I think he also get shot in the head. Miraculously, he survived. Now everyone's probably thinking, how the hell is McElroy not in prison at this point? And well, I have the answers for you guys. Ken McElroy, after that, was actually charged with assault with intent to kill Henry. Now, McElroy denied he was at the scene at all, and as the case dragged on with a court date, without a court date, Henry said McElroy had parked outside his home at least 100 times, trying to intimidate Henry, not to basically drop the charges or something. Now, at the trial, two friends of Ken McElroy. It's kind of crazy that he still had friends in the area who were raccoon hunters, testified, and they said that McElroy was with them on the day of the shooting, and they were kind of, I think, hunting or something like that. Definitely not allegedly anywhere close to Henry's property, and Henry was forced to admit in court under questioning by McElroy's attorney, Richard Gene McFadden, who, was a really good attorney, it seems like, because he kept getting Ken off the hook all these times, you know what I mean? And this guy, Richard Gene McFadden, actually made Henry admit that he had concealed his own petty criminal conviction from more than 30 years ago. And, this led to McElroy getting acquitted. So this is how he avoided the first situation. It kind of seemed like he was going to go to prison for the rest of his life after this. But then he got off the hook like, nothing ever happened. So yeah, that's how he avoided that first incident that he had with Henry. Now, I want to quickly go back to Ken's early years, because we kind of missed one point. Now, when you said like a very interesting thing to me. You said that there wasn't any track record of like mental health issues and things of such nature when it came to Ken McElroy, but I have one little detail here, and the only place that I've seen this was, I'm not gonna lie, BuzzFeed's Unsolved. I mean, yeah, that's like a pretty not the best source in the world, right? But that's the only source that claimed that at some point in his early life, McElroy was believed to have been seriously injured on a construction site, and this caused him to suffer from chronic pain, and that caused him in turn to become a very violent and aggressive person. So, do you have any more information regarding the potential accident that had occurred in his early life?
Oh yeah, that's right. So there was two versions of the story. Oh, and I'll say even before that, as a he flunked fifth grade twice. So I mean, who knows if that's because he was stupid, or because he was um, being neglected. There were some allegations that his parents didn't have great parenting skills. So he did presumably, based on what I heard, grew up in a household of like neglect and abuse, and who knows what was going on with those feral animals that were raising him. Um, but yeah, so the two versions of the thing that potentially happened to him was, one was he was working a construction job when he was younger, and a steel beam hit his head so hard that it split his construction helmet in two, like right down the middle.
Hmm.
Um, okay. And then the version he liked to tell people was that he fell off of a hay wagon. And out of those two stories, the consensus that I got was that the first one, that the steel beam hitting his head on a construction site and breaking the helmet, it's too bad it didn't break his head. Uh, that's probably what really happened.
Mm. I see, I see. That's, well, I I don't know if that would make him psychologically any different, because it does seem like if you're a nice person and that happens to you, you're still gonna be a nice person. Well, or at least not an evil person to the extent that Ken was in his later years. Moving down the timeline here, in 1980, so let's remember the last major incident happened in 1976. 4 years after that, in 1980, Ken was at a grocery store owned by Ernest Bowenkamp. Now, for the first time in this podcast, we're jumping to the Google Earth this is exactly the place, because this is, this second development will kind of lead to Ken's death. So I think it's very important for us to see the map as well. So this is Ernest Bonecamp's grocery store. I want to quickly jump to the Google Earth. Obviously, it's to the street view. Obviously, it's no longer his grocery store, um, but it was this exact building right here back in the day. So he was with his family, I think with his kids, at the store, and there was like a store clerk named Evelyn Summy, and Evelyn Summy accused one of Ken's kids of stealing candy. Yep,
If you don't mind, I'd
of
like
course.
to give the version of the story that I heard. So, as I understand it, this is, like I said, it's so interesting with this case because there's all these different kind of versions of the story, and there was a book that I think if we ever do a follow up to this show, I'd like to read the book ahead of time. But, anyways, the narrative was that actually there were two kids, two of his kids. You know, he has 10 kids, right? Two of his kids were in the store, I think, just by themselves. No one else was with them. So there was a teenager and a 4-year old. I think the teenager was a boy. So what happens was, they're shopping and they're grabbing stuff, and then they come to the front, and Evelyn, right? She brings them up, and the teenager goes, "Oh no, the 4-year-old has his own money," which, by the way, is a douche move, right? I mean, just pay for your 4-year-old sibling, and don't. I don't know who tells a 4-year-old they have to pay for their own stuff, but whatever. The 4-year-old had candy. So what happens is the the clerk, she changes it, Evelyn changes takes it back out of the register, and then rings up the teenager for only what he had, and then the 4-year-old says, "Oh, I don't want, I'm not going to pay for it," so they puts it back. They put back some of the candy, but the 4-year-old kept some of the candy in her hand. So either the teenager that was with the 4-year-old didn't know it, or, as I'll mention later, I don't know. I think they were probably into the habit of stealing like dad, personally. But what happens is the 4-year-old starts to go out the door, and the lady yells like, "Hey, like, she didn't put it back. She still got the candy." Poor Evelyn. Little did she know, probably in the big scheme of things, she should have just kept her mouth shut and let them, steal the jawbreaker, I think, and the gum that was in the kid's hand. Because what happens is there's another sibling. So there's another sibling outside, a teenage girl, who comes in and starts this whole shouting, screaming, like, I mean, you can imagine now what you would see on YouTube, right? When you see these YouTubes of like people throwing tantrums at McDonald's or Burger King, or, stores, or just, acting so entitled. And, and I think these kids of his really were entitled. They were so used to their dad getting his own way. And, his reaction to everything, like any little slight, set him off on these freaking crusades against people, where it's just this narcissism. Well, yeah, the kids, who they learn it from, right? So, anyways, this happens, this whole big tantrum, and then of course, who gets pointed at the store is Mr. Ken McElroy. McElroy, oh, he's got a new cause, right? Someone crossed him again. Someone, he's got a reason. Now he's got a reason to mess with this store. So then this becomes, right. I'm sure you have it
Oh
in the
yeah.
timeline here.
Yep.
This whole other series of events that will eventually end up very bloody for more than one person.
Yeah, so if I can take the baton and finish off what basically happened in this scenario, right? So I think you gave like a lot of good insight into the whole candy stealing like situation, because the only thing I knew that one of the kids took some candy and walked out, like, but that was very vague. I think you kind of brought up some you built the scene a little bit better, maybe hinting at the personality traits of his children, that maybe they weren't like the perfect little angels as well, but like who could really blame them at the same time, because like they are growing up with a monster of a father at that point. So afterwards, you know, the store owner, Ernest Bowenkamp, who was 70 years of age at that point, like an old man, and his wife Louise, um, they got into an argument at one point with McElroy. And now McElroy, as you've said, he had a cause now, so he began stalking the Bowenkamp family and eventually threatened Bo Bowenkamp in the back of his store with a shotgun in hand. So actually where it happened is, I can quickly jump on the map really quickly, and I spent my evening yesterday trying to pinpoint this area. I think it happened on this porch. Now this porch has been kind of remade over the years, but back in the day, this little area actually was like a more significant porch area, and Bo Bowenkamp was actually sitting here relaxing one day while McElroy approached him, and he pretty much threatened him to shoot him. And I think he was pointing the shotgun in at like Bo Bowenkamp's. I mean, Ernest, his nickname was Bo, so we could refer to him Bo Bowenkamp. So McElroy was pointing his shotgun at Bo Bowenkamp's head, and now I'm sure you've seen the news report where Bowenkamp gave his own testimony. At one point, he was thinking, is McElroy gonna really shoot me in the head right now, or is he just trying to scare me away? But at the last second, he decided to definitely dodge, like out of sight. So as he was moving his head away from the shotgun barrel, and as Ken pulled the trigger, it actually grazed his neck. So he had like a serious neck injury, and I think if he wouldn't have dodged, I'm pretty sure that Ken McElroy was going to shoot him in the head at point blank range, which is kind of crazy. And I think you in pre like before talking about like before recording, we kind of had our own little discussion about this case, and one of the mysteries that you brought up in this case, because we are like the solvable mysteries podcast, and we do need some mysteries in these cases. So one of the mysteries was Ken trying to get caught. Like, what do you think, man? Like, his intention at that point, and we will talk about what happened next later, like very soon, but like, do you think that him pointing a shotgun barrel at Bowenkamp's head, like, does that mean that he's like doesn't care about anything anymore and he wants to get caught? Like, he was like looking for that to happen to him.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, that's an excellent question because it feels like he was just continuously pushing boundaries. So his boundaries had started with the stealing, they had escalated to the threats and the intimidation, and bigger and bigger, thefts and extortion, and then it got to the point where just showing the weapons and pointing the weapons at people wasn't enough, because we know that he already did shoot somebody, he just blew someone's guts out practically. I don't know. And then, in this case, I mean, by the way, this isn't this isn't the only person in this period of time that he points a gun at. In fact, at one point, he held a gun on the town marshal, and the town marshal had to grab the shotgun and put it around his head. And then who put a shotgun in the back of his head to try to make him back off? Trena, with another shotgun. So that's going to be part of my narrative later about Trena. But okay, just regarding that, yeah, he'd already, I wonder if he thought that if he didn't try to shoot somebody now and then, that his threats would sort of lose their weight, because he was doing it so often, right? When he's literally showing up outside of people's houses, outside of a church, as we'll find out, outside of just all these places with a gun threatening people. Maybe if you don't pull the trigger once in a while, yeah, I mean, I'm sure mafioso would say that, right? Any kind of mob guys working for those crews would say, "Oh yeah, you got to shoot somebody now and then." I mean, it really makes you wonder if he's testing the boundaries, or if like you said, he's like sort of at the end of his rope, and he's like, yeah, I don't care anymore, so like let something happen to me, or whether he couldn't control his temper in those moments. Now, before I'll end this point, one thing I do wonder, because I know something about shotguns, and normally when you would hit somebody with like, let's say, buckshot, um, buckshot is the equivalent of, let's say, a bunch of like you think of like a small handful of like 22 caliber bullets. So literally bullets, not rounds, bullets hitting a target, right? It's like a bunch of steel balls. I do wonder if he was shooting people with like birdshot instead, which could also be fatal. And actually, birdshot is even worse to try to pick out of a wound um, than buckshot, but birdshot doesn't do as much damage. Do you know what I'm talking about? So birdshot, just for people that aren't firearms savvy,
Yeah, not really.
birdshot are little. They're so the buck. So shotgun shells. The ammunition comes in different sizes. Sometimes it's solid slugs, which like a solid slug would be what you could hunt a deer with, or like a bear or something. Um, But normally people shoot buckshot. Buckshot's what you think of when you think of like, maybe lethal encounters with a shotgun or hunting. You can also hunt a deer with that. That's why they're called buckshot, to hunt to kill bucks. Um, but then shotguns for things like birds, you wouldn't want to shoot a bird with that, right? Because if you shot a bird with buckshot, you'd blow it apart. So when you shoot like, pigeons or clays or ducks or things like that, you use birdshot, and it's progressively smaller and smaller pieces of metal that are, there's more of them though, right? So I can't help but wonder if that's why I don't often hear about somebody shooting two different people from point blank range with a shotgun and them living.
You have an excellent point. Neither do I. That's especially going back to Henry, like the farmer that got shot in '76. Like I think he definitely like got hit in the head and survived. So maybe he did got shot, but like as you say, bird shot as opposed to getting shot with like the tougher, bigger shotgun shell, which would be the buckshot. You know what I mean? That's some good insight. Now McElroy, after shooting or let's say grazing um, Bo Bowenkamp's neck and severely injuring Bo Bowenkamp. Now Bowenkamp survives this. But McElroy was actually convicted at trial of assault. So for the first time, he actually got convicted, but he was freed on bail once again, which is kind of crazy, pending his appeal, right? So like the appeal was pending or whatever. So immediately after being released on bail, once again, Ken McElroy went to the DNG Tavern with an M1 Garand rifle with a bayonet attached and made graphic threats about what he would do to Bo Bowenkamp now. And let's, for everyone who's watching this on the YouTube, so if this is like the Bo Bowenkamp's backyard of his grocery store, this building right here was actually the DNG Tavern, a local bar. I think probably one of the only bars in town because the town is so small. So the next day, after after getting released on bail, he goes to this bar. Well, which it's basically like some sort of a storage unit now, but it was like a bar, and he made graphic threats about killing Bo Bowenkamp. So everyone's like, this guy is getting out of hand. County Sheriff Dan Yeasts, I think his last name is that, suggested that the neighborhood or like the townspeople would form a neighborhood watch. So that's kind of crazy when the sheriff is suggesting a neighborhood watch. Aren't you supposed to be the reason why there is no need for a neighborhood watch? You know what I mean? I think even like the sheriff was like, yo, this guy is out of our control, right?
it was it was so it was so crazy. This guy, like, I don't know how this guy thought he was doing his job unless, some of my other allegations and theories are true. Yeah, they have this meeting and he's like, well, why don't you guys just make a neighborhood watch and keep an eye on it? And Dr. Grande said in his video, he's like, yeah, what do you want him to do? Make a neighborhood watch so they could watch him do crimes and kill them? I mean, like, what was that going to accomplish? And then I don't know if you were planning to mention this, but even between like when Bo was shot and this meeting, and he had been arraigned, brought up on charges, um, and gotten proceeded forward with his usual program of intimidating witnesses, including he had shown up at this bar before, the bar that's right near this location. So prior to this, Ken had shown up with an M1 Garand, which is it's the U.S. Standard Service rifle from World War II. It's a very powerful semi-automatic rifle. If you ever have the privilege of shooting one, it's definitely it's the one you always see in like movies like Saving Private Ryan. It shoots a really powerful round. If he had shot his victims with those things, they would have died. He brings one of those with a bayonet on it and starts making threats about how he's going to kill Bo and all these other things he's going to do. And of course he gets, like, I think, rearrested, and they take away the gun, and then they let him out again. So this by the way, this keeps happening. Like, he keeps on. In this case, I've never even heard of this, where somebody who's out on bail shows up with a firearm, another firearm, gets it taken away, and they let him out again. And it's clear that he has access to more firearms and that he's not going to stop. So that's why the people in this meeting with the sheriff, they are on their last nerve, and they are at their wits' ends. And Grande said that when the sheriff leaves this meeting, so he tells them, "Oh, make a neighborhood watch. Oh, I got stuff to do," and meanwhile, Ken's over at the bar again, drinking, and actually knows about this meeting. So, yeah, the sheriff, "Oh, I got stuff to do." Once again, not really doing his job. But Grande said, like, he didn't really read the room very well, because I don't think he really realized, maybe he was just so used to these poor people acting like sheep, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but acting like defenseless citizens that were relying on the law and order, on the law the law of the land,
I think,
right?
yeah, dude,
Yeah.
I think we need to like build up a little bit of a backstory regarding the meeting, right? Because, we kind of jumped forward here.
Okay.
So basically, the meeting that Glenn was referring was a towns hall meeting. Now, the towns hall, it happened in the Legion Hall. It was this location right here. Now, as we can see, it's like an empty location, but I spent a good amount of time in the evening yesterday actually trying to pinpoint the exact location. So this is a Bo Bonecamp's camp, and this was allegedly the place. This right here, this is the DNG bar, the DNG tavern, where Ken will get killed in like the parking lot, which is, I think, right here. This was the town's Legion Hall meeting, and if you could go back a little bit back in time to, like, well, the earliest thing we have is 1997, so still quite a handful of years later, but we can see an outline of a building. So this was exactly the building that I'm referring to, and it was actually in this location right here. I think even from the grass you can still tell that something was kind of built here many years ago. And they basically have a meeting, as Glenn said. Pretty much the sheriff is like, "Yo guys, you should definitely form a neighborhood's watch, and maybe that's gonna help you out." But yeah, they kind of realized that Ken McElroy was at the DNG tavern as they're having the meeting right around the corner, and Ken allegedly knew about the meeting as well, but he was just chilling in the bar, didn't try to escape or anything like that. So the people from the Legion Hall, they kind of went around the corner, and basically the quote that I heard, filled the bar. And as Ken got outside of the bar, and he was with Trena, I think he grabbed like the 6-pack of beer from the bar and was about to head home. A crowd of people surrounded his vehicle, and then he was actually shot at several times and hit twice by at least 2 different firearms. I think it was 2 different firearms. So two shooters. We think that at least two shooters, and in all, there were 46 potential witnesses. I mean, this is the quote from Wikipedia. I know that other sources state there was up to 70 witnesses, but the quote that I have is 46 potential witnesses to the shooting, including Trena herself, because the wife wasn't killed. She was just sitting in the car with him. Yeah, he was shot. No one called the ambulance. No one said anything. And later on, some developments happened. The DA declined to press charges, and extensive federal investigation did not lead to any charges. One of local residents later told investigators when asked what happened, his quote was, "He needed a killing." Trena McElroy filed a $5 million wrongful death lawsuit against the town of Skidmore, county of Nodaway, and Sheriff Danny Yeasts, as well as the former mayor of Skidmore, Steve Peters, and Del Clement, a man whom Tina accused of being the alleged shooter who did the shooting, on that day. He was never charged, by the way, because no one really came forward. None of the witnesses testified. The case was later settled out of court by all parties for $17,000 and $17,600, with no one admitting guilt for the stated the reason of avoiding costly legal fees should the suit proceed. Trena later on remarried, moved to Lebanon, Missouri, where she died of cancer on her 55th birthday on January 24th, 2012. And the one thing that I want to bring out for everyone who's going to be watching this on the YouTube channel, and yourself, man, because I'm not sure if you've seen this. I want to quickly go over like the crime scene pictures and then the autopsy pictures. Okay, I think we're still in
Ooh,
the
no,
good.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so let's go through those, man, and let's see what you think. So this is the article that I've read. This is the alleged first crime scene picture. This is the DNG tavern. We can see the DNGs right here, the tavern, you know what I mean? So this is the exact place where it happened. And as you can see, we can see shattered window, like the back window on the truck was shattered. So if I'm not mistaken, and maybe you can correct me here, Ken McElroy was actually shot while he was like, in his car, but like he got shot through the back window. Someone was like shooting at the back of his head, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's because this is one of those many unknowns, but he was killed in the truck. Uh, he the six pack still next to him, like you said from the article, that he had bought from the bar when everybody went into the bar and told him to get the hell out of town because they were tired of him. And actually, when the ambulance finally came, that Trina called because no one else wanted anything to do with that scene. I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to be near that scene either. That's who gets blamed, right? Um, his foot was still on the gas. His foot was revving. You know what I mean? Like the car wasn't in gear,
Mhm.
but it was just grind. Revving the engine. Yeah, I can only imagine what I can't help but feel nervous for whenever you shoot at something, you always have to worry about your backstop. So I see a lot of like videos of police shootings and things like that, and I always wince. Um, I don't really wince for the criminal getting shot, but I do wince for the everything behind whoever's getting shot, because bullets have the habit of keeping going if they don't actually hit the victim or something else adjacent to them. So I can only imagine that probably anybody that was in the direction that was being fired at, like even in that bar right there, was potentially in danger, right? If it had penetrated the walls. It's also worth pointing out that there's a lot of kind of weirdness about the investigation in terms of like what calibers were used. So I've heard a couple different quotes, and either way it sounds like maybe a bigger caliber and a smaller caliber were used. So they're pretty sure there were two different guns, because it doesn't seem likely someone fired two different rifles. They think they were rifles. They were like rifle caliber. Um, but like one of the calibers was a large caliber, and one of the calibers was a smaller, like 22 caliber um, either 22 long rifle or 22, I think it was Win Mag. Um, in both cases, you're talking about both a big bullet and a small bullet hitting him,
Yeah.
and it was a lethal combination for him.
Yeah, and we're coming up to the autopsy pictures, which we I think they're fairly graphic, but at the same time, when you'll see them, you will realize why I think we can show them on YouTube. So the next crime scene picture, McElroy struck after the shooting. I think it was already towed into some other place, or maybe not, but maybe this is like another angle, so we could see the door is still open in this picture. This is another picture of the scene. I think we can see some sheriff officers, and this is, the DNG's tavern that it all happened at. Another picture of the DNG's tavern. I'm not sure if this is the exact vehicle or not that was shot at. Doesn't seem like the back window here is smashed, so maybe this is just, another crime scene picture. I think we're coming up to the autopsy, and yes, we have, man. So this is the autopsy, one of the pictures that we're gonna be looking at. It looks like something out of a horror film just because of the low quality and low resolution of the picture. I'm kind of surprised that for 1981, the autopsy pictures are so bad. And yes, dude, this is definitely the autopsy pictures of Ken McElroy. I don't know why they're in this low quality, given the fact that the other pictures are in higher quality. But yeah, what is your take? Hard to make out anything here.
Yeah, it almost, what it almost looks like to me, man? It almost looks like a photocopy of a photo. So that's what it looks like. Especially reminds me of like the 80s era. I used to call them mimeographs. So like photocopiers. Um, they did that a lot. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's taking everything, especially if it was in color. That's what it almost looks like to me. It looks like someone took a color photo and turned it into a black and white copy, and that's what got leaked.
Because we have a few more. We have this was one of those ones that is hard for me to make out what's happening. I know that this is like some sort of a measurement. Maybe they're measuring the hole at the back of his head.
Yeah, entry wound or something, I think. Yeah.
We have another one where they're still measuring. By the way, I have a quick question. What are these little streaks? Now, if this is Ken McElroy, I would assume this is his nose, this is his eyes right here. What are these streaks? Are these like blood streaks out of his
Yeah, that's
nose?
blood, dude. He hemorrhaged right out of his head. He got hit, and basically those bullets made a canal, a channel through his head, and anything that was liquid, your blood takes a lot of brain. So your brain, switch that. Your brain takes a lot of blood, and then whatever else was pumping through his body, because his heart didn't necessarily stop, right? So he may have been hit in the part of the head where his heart could have kept pumping for a while, even as he lost consciousness, and maybe his brain started to get destroyed by the hemorrhaging, or kind of the aneurysm, I guess, caused by that fatal impact.
Yeah. Lastly, we have another picture from another angle, and I think, yeah, it just kind of illustrates the graphicness of the whole thing, you know what I mean? So going back to the original one, you could just see Ken McElroy right here, laying down. He was 47 years of age, I believe, at the time of his death, and basically the town killed him for being a bully. So this is his story, and this is how a bully was dealt with in Skidmore, Missouri back in the early 80s. So yeah, jumping back to the map, I guess, to give a better picture of everything from like the bird's eye view. Legion Hall, they have a meeting. Sheriff's like, you should form a neighborhood watch, and adios amigos, I'm going out somewhere. The townspeople are like, yo, he's at DNG Tavern, let's go. They go in DNG Tavern. The guy's like, Ken McElroy's like, yo, this is a big crowd. I'm probably gonna dodge, grabs 6-pack of beer, enters his car. The townspeople surround him, I think, in this particular area, start shooting the hell out of him. He dies, and no one gets charged. That's the story, and I don't know, theories are kinda non-existent here. Well, we don't really know the exact shooter, but I think the whole town knows the shooter. Okay, so first thing, dude, don't you think it's like so creepy how there are potentially multiple murderers, technically, technically, still murderers that were roaming the town freely?
I mean, I don't. It's funny because the news story from the era, the TV news story, ends with that same tagline that somewhere in the town of Skidmore, there's a murderer loose. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't know. I don't know if I really, I don't know if I call it a murderer. I think I call it self-defense. I call it somebody. I mean, it's kind of amazing because, by the way, the only other murder before this in recent memory happened 60 years before this. So this isn't a town that normally has murders, and frankly, it's amazing that no one had shot this guy before this. I feel like if this if he had, once again, if he had been in almost any other place, if he'd been in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or, maybe a more populous town, I think either the cops would have shot him by then, or organized crime, or a personal enemy. He was acting so hostile, and these people were just turning the other cheek continuously. So from my point of view, I'm not really spooked by it. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
I mean, it's kind of amazing to me, though. Oh, and even I mentioned that town marshal. So that town marshal who was threatened by him, when the guy called for backup, the law enforcement wouldn't help him. So he quit. He resigned the next day. He's like, oh, this small amount of money you guys are paying me, it's not worth it because I can't, if you guys aren't going to back me up when I actually try to deal with the number one problem of this town, then, like the deal's off. Like, I'm not going to do this law enforcement job. It's not worth it. And they had an interview with that guy also in that same newscast. It was interesting.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, dude, regarding like everything that you wanna, break down,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I personally don't really have that much to break down here because I just thought it was like a really creepy case and a different type of case for us where there isn't necessarily like a theory going on here, but there's something to think about, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, so as you mentioned, there's a mystery here, but it's different than the main mystery because I think if you think about it, like the question isn't really who killed him because who killed him? Well, the town killed him. Say a couple people specifically, but really it was like the whole town by not saying who it was, they had collaborated. Um, I think the real question is how it how was he able to go this long, and why did he do it, I think, are the questions. So before we attempt to maybe answer that, I have, like I said, just I'll try to have this go along pretty fast, but this is one of those stories, I think, because this is just, I'll just get into something personal about me. um you know Having a big chip on my shoulder about bullies and having been bullied as a younger person. And I mean, I'm definitely not unique in this. Um, this is the reason why movies, like I said, Death Wish and, um, Dirty Harry and other movies like that are so popular, is because I think people feel really strongly about this. There's a almost human universal need, not just human. I mean, even in other animal species, fairness and equitable treatment, um, fair treatment is something that seems to be almost something that social living beings crave. So when there's an imbalance, it tends to make all of us feel outraged. And I think this is one of those stories where I'll just admit it, I feel a great deal of joy in this story that somebody finally got what was coming to them. And I think that just what makes me mad is the fact that the guy was able to go so long without having to pay that price. So, I mean, like I said, it's almost unbelievable. I mean, we've really tried to flesh it out, but there are there's books, there's some other YouTubes about this, there's some articles that go pretty in depth about it, but it's just amazing that he was able to do this. And I can't help but wonder what's going on here. Like this was 20th century America, and this guy was acting like a warlord, like a one man mafia, like a warlord in like Afghanistan or like ancient Scotland or something, where this guy was just violating all the rules. Now it's interesting to think that if he had done this in some of those other societies, like I said, in Afghanistan or places like that, they probably would have killed him already, because that was the whole point of those societies, is that because you couldn't afford to have somebody running around like this, when there's not a strong central government, so there's not like a federal government or a state government or a county or some body that will make sure that someone gets punished. And when someone's carrying off your property, especially when your property can kind of carry itself off like cattle, someone like this can do a lot of damage. And he was, in fact, doing a tremendous amount of economic damage. They say that he was living a pretty comfortable living. He was making like basically an upper middle class income off of his theft. Now, that's where I really have to wonder if that is why the county, state, and federal law enforcement were not protecting the citizens. I can't help but wonder if I strongly suspect that Ken had corrupted one or more of those layers of law enforcement. And I won't even call it the justice system. It's not the criminal justice system, because there was no justice. It was the legal system. And he had a lawyer. The lawyer was a horrible human being, by the way. He was interviewed in that same thing. He said that Ken was a great client because he kept bringing him business. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I guess it's good for your business. Maybe not so good for society, and all these, underage people getting raped by this guy and all these other crimes that happen. And that guy died. And by the way, almost everybody we're talking about died. So, I guess they're not here to defend themselves, but I would love to kind of tear them a new one if we could talk to them. So the lawyer died in 2008. Like I said, the other kind of major figures died long before this as well, time of recording. But yeah, I can't help but wonder if this was why all of a sudden law enforcement got real interested in helping and prosecuting people as soon as he died. Because
Yeah.
if they weren't afraid of him, but they shouldn't have been afraid of him, right? They had guns too. They could have shot him and said, "Oh, he reached for a gun." I mean, we've seen it all the time. We've seen all over the place cops, other law enforcement agencies, other people in power make up excuses to shoot somebody that was a problem. So I don't see that. You know, I mean, really, all it took was the will, right? To say, oh, this guy was a problem. We saw it in the Rampart scandal down here in Los Angeles back in the late '90s, where it turned out, yeah, like some part of the LAPD was doing that, like they were shaking down drug dealers, and and shooting some of them, just because either they were problems or they wouldn't play ball. So certainly, law enforcement is not above it. But I can't help but wonder if the reason why they didn't do that was because he was a source of revenue for them. So yeah, when he died, and all of a sudden the golden goose was killed for them. Oh, now they care. Now they're convening grand juries, two grand juries, by the way, that didn't, that didn't happen when he had done these other things to other people. But when he died, these when he was blowing people into pieces, no grand juries. But when he committed, when he died, all of a sudden we must have justice, right? Okay, so that was pretty weird. Also, I know, like, Trena specifically is a problematic person in this, because I think she might have had some amount of like Stockholm syndrome. Stockholm syndrome is when a hostage starts to identify with her captor, or his or her captor. This is based on a famous thing that happened in Stockholm. But it's also there's a good example is Patty Hearst, where Patty Hearst was the daughter was basically the rich and wealthy daughter of one of the most powerful media figures of his time, sort of the Bill Gates of the early 20th century, William Randolph Hearst. I think she was either daughter or granddaughter. I can't remember. Anyway, this terrorist group took her hostage and they brainwashed her for a couple of weeks, and she ended up joining them. And she ended up doing a robbery, and she ended up getting arrested later. I mean, she was lucky she wasn't killed because the rest of the terrorist group was killed, and she actually served some jail time for that crime. So she went from being a victim to a criminal. I would argue that Trena was the same thing, where Trena obviously had her faith in authority other than the authority outside of Ken undermined, and for all we know, maybe he had made it clear to her that no one would ever help her. But at some point, she crossed from being a victim to accomplice, because she apparently had been part of these intimidation tactics. She had pulled guns on a law enforcement official. She had been part of these kind of drive-by, um, like intimidation scenes where she's hanging out the window with a shotgun as they're going by the next person's house to intimidate somebody for whatever kind of
Yeah.
whatever kind of beef he had with somebody, right? Which was, he had this like endless enemies list. So okay, I'm not going to be drag that out too much, but when I see her in the videos, I really feel a lot of like some degree of contempt for her, despite knowing that she did not start into the situation of her own volition, let's say, and she's definitely a victim also. But at some point at the end there, her lawsuit I think was ridiculous. I can't believe it's like I said, I feel like this town was ignorant of their legal rights, because really they should have sued all of the law enforcement agencies and the state and local governments around them. They should have countersued her because she was a participant. I think once again it's like people that just didn't have, like now with the social media and better access to legal resources, and just being even being able to bring local press and national press in the scene, you could have shamed the crap out of her, and those law enforcement people, and really made them look bad. But it didn't happen. So shoulda, woulda, coulda. Okay, so that's leading into what I'm talking about here was I think that finally, this did seem like something out of the 1880s instead of the 1980s. I mean, it really sounded like something you would see in a cowboy movie with this guy doing cattle rustling. He's cattle rustling and he's shooting up towns and shooting people. And it really did sound like a cowboy movie gone wrong. Um, I have to say, I'm not saying this to the people of Missouri, but I'm saying this to like the state and local authorities there. Shame on you. Shame on you, Missouri. Shame on you, the county that Skidmore was in, and their law enforcement. I'm sure they're all dead now. The judges, all the people that so many times, I mean, it wasn't like he hadn't gone to court before, but he'd never really had to until this, when he shot Bo, he never had to really face the music. And this looked like it was finally like he was going to actually, maybe, God forbid, serve 1 or 2 years in jail for, blowing someone's neck off almost. Okay. But yeah, then that made him extra mad, right? So, okay, it does show you, by the way, that you do really need to have guns for self-defense in some situations, because I don't even understand how these other people in town didn't have guns. Okay, that being said, that's my kind of rant. Quick questions is that, you know, in a situation like this, and police can't or won't do anything, and it's clear that this guy's victimizing something, are people morally entitled to protect themselves by taking the law into their own hands like they did here? Um, I don't know. I mean, I say yes.
Me too.
It was,
I
yeah,
think I think I will agree here. I will say that in such a situation, well, I mean, I don't know. I could see it going both ways. I was watching the BuzzFeed Unsolved. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of enjoyed this one for this case, and they did make a good point. It's justified as long as it doesn't turn into a situation where someone doesn't cut their grass often enough, and there's a little meeting at the
yeah,
Legion Hall, and they surround the guy's, home, and they're like, we have two solutions for you: either start cutting that grass or we start shooting. So as long as it's not like that, then I think it's okay.
Well, that's the whole point, right? That's why we have this social contract with each other in, your country and in mine and in many other like countries, is that we have a central government, and essentially we are willing, in theory, to forego immediate vigilante justice for a system that promises us that the situation will be evaluated, and that there will be both like criminal punishments applied, and maybe also civil redress. Because like I think it's probably the same where you are, where it is where I am. There's both the criminal phase of trials, and there's like a civil court where you could take someone like Ken McElroy or Trena or whoever to court and say, hey, listen, you caused damages to me. um, you need to pay for the damages you caused. And sometimes, like, sometimes someone like OJ or Robert Blake will be found innocent of murder in the criminal court, and then found guilty of murder in the civil court, and have to, like, potentially be liable for millions of dollars, um, to the family of their victim, let's say, or victims. Okay, so that's one thing. I mean, I think some of the stuff I've already raised about, you know what was going on here. I mean, the one thing I don't understand is how, in good faith, and I don't know that we have an answer other than like they were getting paid off potentially. How could they look at somebody who has like their stomach blown out, or or their or, holes in their neck from shotgun blasts, and think like, even with this guy, having his friends lie for him, and his friends, I would argue his friends were probably in on the criminal activities he was doing, because he didn't just do things alone. Like, he would actually make women often be part of his criminal plans. That was, they would tip him off, or, I guess potentially provide excuses. But it sounds like he had some kind of social life. um, but I don't understand how the authorities in this case could look at this and say, oh, they're just faking. They're just trying to frame a good guy. I mean, it was just this nonstop list of things that he'd done to people his entire life. And for, like Dr. Grande said, people kept believing him. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if anyone was really believing him. It just seems like they weren't willing to follow the trail. And I can't believe, they said, okay, well, someone could say, oh, well, it's because he was threatening everybody, and was so persistent. Yeah, but like judges have special protections. Like, anyone that tries to mess with a judge is in for a very quick, like, lesson in the power of the state. At least someplace like the United States normally. I don't know what happened here. It's really baffling to me. And that's where it's like, yeah, if you don't follow those rules, if the state doesn't hold up its end of the bargain, that's when you see sort of like I'm not getting political, but this is where kind of the Talibans of the world come from, and where these customs in other parts of the world, both historically and currently in places, where they don't have a strong central government. That's where these little towns and families and clans and groups of people take the law into their own hands, because they have no guarantee otherwise that this person isn't going to come back and do something worse, which is literally what happened here. This guy kept coming back again and again. Okay, so then finally, I think as we get into the home stretch here, the real question is, and we touched on this, what was going on with this guy? Because he didn't seem happy. No, I haven't seen one picture of this guy smiling. Like, you would think, I mean, there's plenty of pictures of Al Capone or all these other mobsters, people that had essentially the same living, the same kind of career path he did the same things. But there's plenty of pictures of even some of the worst and most violent gangsters smiling and seemingly, I mean, they're not all happy people, but you know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, that was the one thing that struck me, is every picture that I saw of him, of Ken. I don't think I see none of these pictures. I mean, did you see any pictures where he had kind of a normal, friendly, happy face?
Not really. That's a good point. I never seen one.
Right? I mean, it's always like his mouth's kind of half open, or and I get like maybe okay, it could be the press, it could be the way they're framing it that they don't really want to catch him in a flattering photo. That could be true, but I don't know. I mean, I see a lot of pictures of all these famous criminals from the past, especially ones that were doing, I would say, organized crime and a lot of the extortion and theft and activities. He doesn't seem like a happy person. And we alleged, sorry, we reflected on his head injury. I never heard about him getting hospitalized for that head injury. Maybe I missed it. But like unlike like someone like Sam Kinison was hit by a car when he was like around 10 years old, and his personality changed. But he spent time in the hospital for that. So, he went from being one kind of person to a much more impulsive and kind of wild person after that. For Ken, I mean, he may have just had an accident where it hit his head, but I don't know that there was any specific evidence that he was suffering from like seizures or other things. It's not saying that couldn't happen, but I'm not seeing some sort of any of the other signs that maybe he suffered a major injury from whatever happened to him. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
wrong. Maybe
yeah,
maybe that's just happened. But so then, the reason why I'm saying like, well, why isn't he happy is because I have to wonder if there's like this need for him to be noticed and to be respected, and maybe he really was insecure. Maybe he really is showing his insecurity that he comes from this family where clearly he didn't get enough attention. He starts failing early in life, and then his only success is sort of doing the things he's not supposed to do. And then he finds that this massive amount of antisocial activity, like his winning strategy is to commit crimes and then get very vindictive with anybody that dares oppose him. But then at some point, like he's not satisfied with that, even though I mean, he's having like relationships, and not all of his relationships were like forced or with underage people. It sounds like he was, I guess, just like bad boys are attractive to some women. He seems to also have had that going on. I'm not saying that that's the case with his teenage victims or teenage relationships, but those weren't the only people that he had relationships with. So to some degree, he's popular. Like it's like we said, he had friends. They weren't nice people, but he, sort of in this scumbag world, he was I guess, a powerful person and a increasingly wealthy one from his thefts and illegal businesses. But he's not happy, and I think you make a good point. When he's doing these things, is he like getting more and more desperate or frantic in terms of trying to attract attention to himself? I think that's the real mystery here is why couldn't this guy just take it down about 2 or 3 notches? I mean, it seems like he could have cruised on this little program he had of like, he didn't have to shoot these people, I don't think. I mean, despite me saying, well, maybe you do have to pull the trigger once in a while. He could have shot near somebody, but he said it seems like he tried to like nearly kill them or kill them.
yeah.
So yeah, that seems counterproductive to you know doing what he was doing. But then again, you do see that with other organized crime figures, including like the people that Joe Pesci has played in both Casino and Goodfellas. I mean, those people had done kind of impulsive or violent things that, in fact, did come back to haunt them later. I don't know. I don't know if that's just part of the antisocial personality that you're always. It's weird because it almost sounds like I'm saying it comes down to him wishing mommy and daddy loved him more. But I am kind of saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me personally, I would definitely want some more information regarding that accident, because some sources like kind of portray that was kind of something that led him to become who he was, but I wouldn't put too much weight on it initially because I don't think no matter what kind of an injury you have, and unless it's really like some sort of a brain injury, then maybe. But from what I've gathered, like he had like chronic body pains, which would probably not make you into a extremely violent person. I think there was supposed to be some sort of a brain damage situation going. So I would be curious to find out. Maybe someone in the audience knows more about that particular detail, because I think that would kind of paint a better picture, if you know what I mean.
I do wonder how much longer he would have lived, because he was 47 years old and he was, in theory, significantly overweight. I mean, you look at him in the pictures, they say he was maybe, they're not, there's some variation on his height, but he was anywhere between 5'10" to 6 feet tall. And his weight was anywhere between 220 to 270 pounds, maybe as much as 300 pounds. Um, I mean, that could be some of the source of his aches and pains. Just that he's getting older. He's starting to get maybe arthritis and health issues, because this is before a lot of the blood pressure and cholesterol medication we have now. I mean, he could have been only a couple of years away from a major heart attack or stroke, if not cancer, because he had apparently they say he probably had somewhat of a drinking problem
Yeah,
as well. So maybe alcohol was fueling
yeah,
some amount of this bad behavior that you would see from him.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe he's drinking to medicate some of the mental issues.
exactly. So yeah, I mean, other than that, on my end, yeah, if you have some.
Yeah, just one closing thought. I couldn't help but get struck that the way this guy operated. I already mentioned, organized crime.
Mhm.
I mean, in a way, he really is a terrorist. I mean, minus the politics, he's not that much different than, like, the Viet Cong, or the insurgents, the insurgency in some place like Iraq, or other countries that we fought in, where his tactics were very much about terrorizing people, for some end that he cared about. It's just amazing that he was able to go so long, um, and that I guess that this town was so well behaved that someone didn't. I think it only happened once or twice where someone else, like, threatened him back and he kind of calmed down. But unfortunately, I guess this must have been like the nicest town in Missouri, because he didn't meet enough people that were willing to bully him back, or let him know that what was going to happen. And I guess the one thing I wondered is, I wonder if his kids ever realized that they helped kill their dad by acting like that in the store. I mean, you have to say they're probably victims too, but in terms of being raised by someone like that. But you know because of them, he
Mm,
ended up doing something that was a bridge too far.
yeah, no, that's a good point, because they kind of, did well. It kind of culminated from that. So yeah, I think we kind of had a really good conversation this week about a different case, definitely a little bit of a different case. Next week, probably gonna return to more of a regular individual mysteries, but just wanted to really bring up this case. Glenn has been following it for years and definitely had like a lot of strong opinions, so it was only right that we do it, because I think regarding this case, we kind of talked about stuff that, or brought up stuff that you will probably not find on other podcasts about this case, or shorter, content made by other content producers or whatever. So I'm really hoping you guys appreciated and enjoyed this week's episode. We're always excited to read your comments in the YouTube section for everyone who's listening on the YouTube channel, and also for everyone who's listening on the podcast apps. If you don't mind, give us a rating, whichever rating you think we deserve, and we will catch you next week with some more interesting mysteries. As always, I hope the rest of your week is going swell, guys, and yeah, don't forget to stay safe, and we'll catch you on the next week's episode. Peace out.